Weddings are supposed to be the happiest day of a mother's life, but at my son's wedding, happiness was the last thing I felt. I was sitting at table 7, far from the head table where I had expected to be, when the moment came that would burn itself into my memory forever. My daughter-in-law, radiant in her lace gown, stood up, seized the microphone, and with a smile as sharp as broken glass, announced to 150 guests, "Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Michael's mother hasn't paid for a thing. The old cheap woman couldn't even give us a proper gift. Maybe she should write us a check. $80,000 would do." The ballroom fell silent. For one suspended second, you could almost hear the chandeliers hum. Then, like the crack of ice on a frozen lake, the first laugh broke out. Another followed, and another. Until laughter rippled across the room in waves. They weren't laughing at a joke, they were laughing at me, the mother of the groom, and in that cruel laughter, something inside me snapped. The Belmont Country Club in California looked flawless that evening. White roses spilled from towering crystal vases, chandeliers glowed golden light over polished hardwood, and champagne sparkled in crystal flutes. To anyone else, it was the wedding of the year. To me, it was a gilded cage. From the moment I arrived, something had felt off. Instead of being seated near my son, I had been tucked away among distant relatives and one of his old college roommates. Susan had made the seating chart, of course. Her message was clear. I was an accessory, not family. I wore the best dress I owned, navy blue with tiny pearls. I had purchased it 3 years ago for my late husband's funeral. It wasn't couture, it wasn't designer, but it was neat, appropriate, and I thought it respectable enough for my only child's wedding. I thought wrong. The ceremony itself had been beautiful. I smiled for photos, exchanged polite small talk, and watched my son glow with that unmistakable bliss of a man newly married. For a moment, seeing Michael's face illuminated with joy, I remembered my own wedding day 35 years earlier, but the peace did not last. The trouble began during the toasts. Susan's father spoke about family traditions. Michael's best man shared embarrassing college stories. Susan's mother delivered a polished speech about love and commitment. Then the microphone was passed to me. My palms were damp, but my voice was steady. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to celebrate Michael and Susan," I began. "Michael has always been the light of my life, and seeing him this happy fills my heart. Susan, welcome to our family. I know you'll take care of each other." It was short, simple, sincere, but before I could continue, Susan rose abruptly, her cheeks flake. I gave it to her, expecting perhaps a sweet addition. Instead, her voice boomed through the speakers, sharp and merciless. "Michael's mother talks about family," she said, "but where's her contribution? We spent $43,000 on this reception alone, and she hasn't paid a cent. Not even a proper engagement gift." My stomach dropped. She shows up in her bargain bin dress, eats our expensive food, drinks our premium bar, and what does she bring? A $20 picture frame from Target. That's it. Maybe she could at least write a check. $80,000 would do. The words rang through the ballroom like a bell tolling at a funeral. At first, there was silence. Shock, perhaps, then a chuckle, then another. Soon the room erupted with mocking laughter. Susan's friends cackled at the head table. Even some of my relatives hid smiles behind napkins. Michael muttered, "Susan, that's enough." But his voice was weak, his protest hollow. He didn't stand. He didn't shield me. And in that moment, I felt abandoned. I set my napkin carefully on the table. My movements were deliberate, almost regal, though my insides shook. I rose. Every eye followed me. Some showed pity, others amusement. But I did not explain. I did not defend myself with excuses about pensions and savings. "Excuse me," I said simply, and walked out. The laughter chased me across the ballroom, echoing off marble as I pushed through the glass doors and into the night. The cool California air slapped against my burning cheeks. My hands shook so badly I could barely unlock my old Honda Civic. Inside the car, silence pressed in, broken only by muffled music from the ballroom. This was my son's wedding. And I was alone in the parking lot, exiled because his wife had decided to humiliate me publicly. The cruelest part wasn't the accusation of money. It was the laughter, the confirmation that in their eyes, my worth was measured by the contents of my bank account. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, tears burning hot. For a moment, despair threatened to drown me, and then clarity. I remembered something Susan didn't know. Something nobody in that glittering ballroom knew. I scrolled through my phone, found the name, and pressed call. "Robert," I whispered when he answered, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's Janet. I think it's time." On the other end, Robert Whitman, my attorney, paused. "Are you certain?" Through the windshield, I saw the ballroom glowing, guest silhouettes against golden light. I clenched my jaw. I've never been more certain of anything. Robert exhaled. "Very well. I'll have the documentation ready. But Janet, are you sure you want it displayed this way? It's rather dramatic." A bitter laugh escaped me. Dramatic? After being publicly ridiculed by 150 people? Dramatic was justice. "Yes, Robert, exactly as we planned. Full disclosure." I hung up, reapplied my lipstick in the rearview mirror, and stepped out of the car. Each step back toward the country club entrance felt heavy, but also purposeful. The doorman opened the door with a sympathetic smile. "Everything all right, ma'am?" "Perfect," I said, and for the first time all evening, I meant it. Inside, the band played. The guests danced. Susan laughed loudly at the head table, still savoring her public victory, but she had no idea. Because in 15 minutes, the next toast wouldn't be a speech. It would be a revelation big enough to bring the entire ballroom crashing down. The air outside the Belmont Country Club was cool, but the humiliation that still clung to me burned hotter than fire. The laughter of 150 guests still echoed in my ears. I sat in my Honda Civic, the same car Susan had ridiculed, gripping the steering wheel as if it could anchor me. For the first time in years, I wished my husband were still alive. David would have stood tall, shielded me, silenced the cruel laughter. But David was gone, and it was just me, an old widow in a navy dress that had been bought for his funeral, now mocked as cheap. But unlike Susan and her mocking friends, I wasn't without power, and unlike Michael, who sat paralyzed at the head table, I had resolve. Because I carried a secret. One that could turn this wedding into something no one would ever forget. When Robert picked up my call, his voice had been steady, professional, though I could hear the hesitation beneath it. "Are you certain?" he'd asked. "I've never been more certain," I said, my voice sharper than I'd expected. Robert had been my attorney for 15 years, since David's passing. He had guided me through the complexities of estate management, tax filings, and the slow unspooling of a widow's new life. But tonight, his role was different. Tonight, he was the keeper of a truth that would change everything. "All right," he said finally. "The documentation is prepared. The catering manager has the device. In 10 minutes, the presentation will begin." His words settled into me like iron. In 10 minutes, the country club's ballroom would no longer be a place of laughter. It would become a theater of revelation. I leaned back in the driver's seat, closing my eyes. My mind drifted backward, unspooling the 6 months that had led to this moment. It had started at Aunt Eleanor's funeral. Eleanor Hartwell had been my father's sister, a woman who never married, never had children, and never apologized for living life her own way. She had been called eccentric, stubborn, even cold. She worked as a traveling nurse for decades before turning to real estate in neighborhoods most people had dismissed as worthless. In family gatherings, whispers followed her. "She buys in bad areas, she wastes her money." But Eleanor had vision. When she passed at 91, the reading of her will had stunned me. To the disbelief of distant cousins who had assumed they would inherit, Eleanor had left everything to me. Her portfolio, once mocked, had grown into a fortune. Apartment complexes in Austin, townhouses in San Diego, small office buildings in Phoenix. What she had bought for pennies decades ago had turned into millions. The total, $2.7 million. I remembered sitting in Robert's office as he read the will aloud, my hands trembling as if I held a live wire. And then came the strange condition. Eleanor's sharp handwriting on the page seemed to stare directly at me. "My estate is to be transferred to my niece, Janet Hartwell, on one condition. She must not disclose its existence for 6 months. During this time, she must observe how her family treats her without the knowledge of money. Should she determine that kindness and respect remain intact, despite presumed poverty, she may establish a family trust to benefit them. Should she find cruelty, neglect, or disdain, the estate is to be donated to charities supporting the dignity of the elderly. I leave the decision and the judgment of character in her hands. I had stared at Robert in disbelief. She wants me to test them? To sit back and watch? Eleanor always believed money revealed truth, Robert had said softly. She was a good judge of character. Perhaps she wanted to see if you are as well. 6 months. 6 months of keeping silent, of watching, of listening. 6 months of hearing Susan roll her eyes at my furniture, whisper to Michael that I was an embarrassment, drop subtle comments about nicer neighborhoods and senior communities with meals included. 6 months of my son, my only child, drifting further away. 3 weeks before the wedding, the cruelty had sharpened. Michael had come by with Susan to deliver the wedding invitation. She had perched on my couch like it might stain her dress, her eyes roaming the room with disdain. "You know, Janet," she had said, crossing her legs, "after we return from our honeymoon, we think it's time you consider selling this place. Maybe move into one of those nice assisted living facilities. Nothing fancy, just more appropriate for your situation." Your situation. The words had burned. Michael had nodded silently, not meeting my eyes. "It would give us peace of mind, Mom," he'd mumbled, "knowing you're safe, with people to check in on you." Safe. As if my independence was a threat. As if my modest apartment, my coupon-filled drawers, my second-hand furniture, made me unfit to live alone. That night, after they left, I had called Robert. "Prepare the documents. If they're so worried about my financial situation, maybe it's time they see the truth." And now, here I was, sitting in my Civic, wiping away the last of my tears, fixing my lipstick in the rearview mirror, preparing to walk back into that ballroom not as a victim, but as a storm. The band's music floated faintly through the night air. Inside, guests danced. Susan laughed, glasses clinked. They thought the humiliation was over. They thought I had slunk away, defeated. But they were wrong. The humiliation was just the beginning. I pushed open the door and stepped out, heels clicking against the pavement. Each step toward the country club felt heavier, but my resolve grew stronger. At the entrance, the doorman gave me a sympathetic smile. "Everything all right, ma'am?" "Perfect," I said. And for the first time that evening, I meant it. Inside, the ballroom was alive with music. The band played an upbeat tune, couples spun on the dance floor, and the chatter had risen again, though quieter than before. A few heads turned as I slipped back into the room, sliding silently into my seat at table 7. The woman beside me glanced at me nervously. Perhaps she expected me to cry, to beg for comfort. Instead, I folded my hands calmly on the table, eyes fixed on the stage. On stage, the band finished their number. The lead singer stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we've been asked to pause the music for a special presentation. If everyone could direct their attention to the screen behind us." A murmur swept through the crowd. Confused glances darted around the room. Susan, still laughing at the head table, frowned. Michael's brow furrowed. Above the stage, a large screen descended slowly, the projector flickering to life. The ballroom lights dimmed. My heart thudded once, steady and sure. This was Eleanor's legacy. This was the test. This was the moment the truth would breathe. As the screen glowed white, I felt the silence press in, thick and expectant. The laughter was gone. The smug smiles vanished. And in that heavy quiet, the first image appeared. The ballroom lights dimmed, the chandeliers casting ghostly shadows over the tables as the projector hummed to life. For a moment, there was only static white light on the descending screen, a pause heavy with confusion. Guests leaned forward, whispering. Susan, at the head table, frowned and tugged on Michael's sleeve. He looked bewildered, glancing toward the band as though they had made some sort of mistake. Then, the silence was pierced by a voice. Not mine, not the band's, it was Susan's. "God, you should see his mother's apartment. It's like stepping back into 1980. Polyester furniture, clip-on lamps, pathetic little kitchen. She shops exclusively at garage sales." The room gasped as her image appeared, crisp and unforgiving on the enormous screen. She stood in a bridal boutique, twirling in front of 3 mirrors, while her bridesmaids clutched champagne flutes, giggling. Her laughter was cruel, not joyful. Honestly, she continued on screen, adjusting the bodice of a gown that must have cost more than my monthly pension. She's an embarrassment. Michael's defending her like it's some noble poverty act, but really, it's pathetic. A ripple of discomfort swept through the guests. Chairs shifted, napkins fluttered. Someone cleared their throat too loudly, trying to mask the tension. At the head table, Michael froze, his face pale, eyes locked on the giant version of his wife. Beside him, Susan's jaw went slack. "What is this?" she hissed, but her voice was swallowed by her own amplified laughter spilling from the speakers. The video cut to another scene, Susan seated on a sunny terrace at a country club, mimosa in hand, with her mother and sister. She leaned across the table, showing them her phone. "Look at this," she said, displaying a picture frame. "This is what she gave us for our engagement, a $20 frame from Target. Can you believe it?" Her mother grimaced, shaking her head. Her sister laughed, a mean-spirited cackle. "Oh dear," her mother murmured. "Perhaps she doesn't understand the expectations." "She understands perfectly," Susan snapped. "She's just cheap. Michael keeps making excuses about her fixed income. But come on, she was a teacher for 30 years. She should have savings, investments. Instead, she hoards pennies like a squirrel. It's embarrassing." This time the murmurs grew louder. Guests exchanged glances, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. A woman at table 9 covered her mouth. At table 3, a man muttered, "My God." At my table, no one dared look at me. But I sat still, hands folded, eyes steady on the screen. The video shifted again. Susan's apartment. She paced, phone pressed to her ear, her tone sharp. "I'm telling you, Mom, something has to be done about her. Can you imagine introducing her to the partners at Michael's firm? This is my mother-in-law. She shops at Walmart and drives a 15-year-old Civic. It's humiliating. No, she doesn't have any money stashed away. I checked. She probably has less than $5,000 to her name. I didn't marry Michael to become a charity case for his pathetic mother." The word pathetic reverberated in the ballroom like a gunshot. Susan on screen laughed, but no one in the real room joined her. The audience sat frozen, faces tight with secondhand shame. At the head table, Michael's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. His eyes darted from the screen to the real Susan beside him, as though trying to reconcile 2 women, the blushing bride in lace, and the venomous woman flickering 10 feet tall in front of everyone they knew. The final clip played. Susan stood in their living room, arms crossed, voice hard. Michael sat on the couch, shoulders slumped. "Your mother is going to ruin everything," she snapped. "The wedding is in 3 weeks, and I'm already dreading how she'll look next to my family. My parents spent $18,000 on their outfits alone. She'll probably show up in some thrift store dress. It's pathetic, Michael. She has no resources, which means she's going to be our responsibility forever. Do you want to support your mother for the rest of your life? Because that's what will happen." On the couch, Michael's recorded voice was quiet, defensive. "She's doing her best, Susan. She doesn't have the resources your parents do." "That's my point," Susan barked. "She's 63, living in a rundown apartment, driving a junk car. She's 1 medical bill away from destitute. And when that happens, guess who she'll come running to? Us. I want you to set boundaries. After we're married, we need to make it clear we won't be her safety net. If she doesn't like it, too bad." The screen went black. For a moment, there was nothing. No music, no laughter, only the faint hum of the air conditioner and the collective silence of 150 people watching a marriage unravel before it had even begun. Then a sound broke it, the thud of Susan's body hitting the floor. She had fainted, collapsing against the pristine white tablecloth of the head table. Glasses toppled, someone screamed. The wedding cake wobbled before sliding sideways, 3 tiers of sponge and buttercream crashing into a sugary ruin. Chaos erupted. Bridesmaids shrieked, rushing to her side. The country club staff hurried with water and smelling salts. Susan's father stood frozen, face red with fury and humiliation. I remained seated at table 7, calm, almost detached, as though watching a play unfold. After all, wasn't this Eleanor's design? To reveal true character, stripped bare under pressure? Susan stirred, blinking awake, confusion clouding her face. Then recognition slammed into her, and her features twisted with horror. "The video," she whispered, voice cracking. "Who did this?" Michael's hands hovered uselessly near her. "Susan," he said quietly, but his voice carried in the silence. "What the hell was that?" "They were private conversations," she protested, struggling to sit up. "Someone violated my privacy. This is illegal." But no one seemed convinced. The guests had seen her own words, her own expressions, her true contempt. At table 7, the woman beside me leaned closer. "My God," she whispered, "I had no idea. I'm so sorry." Around the room, similar murmurs rose. The tide had turned. I was no longer the subject of pity or ridicule. I was the victim of a bride's calculated cruelty. Susan swayed to her feet, eyes darting wildly. "It was stress. Planning the wedding, I didn't mean any of it." She reached for Michael's hand, but he pulled back. "You called my mother pathetic," he said, louder now, his voice shaking. "You said she was an embarrassment to our family. You wanted to send her to a nursing home just to get rid of her." "Michael, please," she begged, but her words tumbled into the silence like stones into a well. The more she spoke, the deeper she sank. I rose slowly, smoothing the folds of my dress. All eyes turned to me. The laughter from earlier seemed like a memory from another life. I walked toward the head table, each step measured, deliberate. "You wanted to know about my finances, Susan?" I asked, my voice carrying clearly. "You seemed very concerned about what I could or could not contribute." Susan froze, face drained of color. "Janet, Oh, but you did mean it," I interrupted gently, almost kindly. "Those recordings showed exactly who you are when you believe no one important is listening." I reached into my purse and withdrew a folded document. Michael's eyes widened. "Mom, you don't need to." "Actually, I think I do." I unfolded the paper, holding it up so the numbers were visible. "As of this morning, my checking account balance is $2.7 million. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a glass shatter on the carpet. Susan's mouth opened and closed, soundless. Around the room, guests stared at me with wide eyes, whispers beginning to build. I continued, my tone steady. "That money came to me 6 months ago, from my Aunt Eleanor. She left me her entire estate, with one condition that I remain silent and observe how my family treated me when they believed I had nothing." Michael looked stricken. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by shame. "She was testing us," he whispered. "Not testing," I corrected. "Revealing." The guests shifted, the weight of the moment settling over them. Eleanor's wisdom, Eleanor's plan, had unfolded exactly as she intended. Susan sagged into her chair, her face ashen. "You were rich this whole time?" she croaked. "Yes," I said calmly. "Rich enough to pay for this entire wedding without blinking. Rich enough to buy you a house, a car, whatever you desired. But I chose not to, because I wanted to see who my son had chosen to share his life with. And now, we've all seen." Gasps, murmurs. The crowd's judgment hung heavy, and Susan's world crumbled beneath it. Michael stared at me, guilt written across his features. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have defended you." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." He dropped his gaze, shame etched deep. Susan shook her head violently, her voice rising. "This is insane. You're destroying my marriage with some stupid test. You can't." Her words faltered as I reached back into my purse and withdrew another document, this one bearing the letterhead of Whitfield and Associates. "There's more," I said quietly. Every head in the ballroom turned, the silence tightened like a noose. I unfolded the paper slowly, deliberately, as if revealing a weapon. "This is my aunt's full will, and it explains exactly what she wanted me to do with her money." The ballroom leaned in. Michael looked up, eyes searching mine. "What do you mean?" I drew in a breath, preparing to read. And then, just as the words formed on my tongue, the screen behind me flickered back to life. The ballroom was already suffocating with silence when the projector flared again, unprompted. Murmurs rippled through the guests as another video clip appeared. My pulse quickened. This wasn't part of Robert's plan. On screen, Susan sat in a cafe booth, her back straight, her hair tied neatly, her eyes darting around as though she didn't want to be overheard. Opposite her was a man in a suit I didn't recognize. She leaned across the table, lowering her voice, though the hidden camera caught every word. "She thinks she's clever," Susan whispered, "living like some pauper schoolteacher, when really, she's sitting on money. I know it. She hides it because she wants sympathy. Pathetic." The man frowned. "You're sure?" "Positive. And once Michael and I are legally married, I'll convince him to take control of her finances. We'll put her in a senior facility, liquidate her apartment, whatever's left. Then we'll finally live the way we deserve." Gasps burst through the ballroom like firecrackers. A woman dropped her champagne flute. Glass shattered. Michael's face went white, then red, then pale again, as though his body couldn't decide between rage and shame. Susan leapt to her feet, her voice shrill. "That's not real. That's someone edited that." But the damage was done. The room had already judged. Every guest had seen her greed, her calculation, her disdain. I steadied myself, my fingers tightening on Eleanor's will, still clutched in my hand. The silence hung heavier than crystal chandeliers. Then I spoke. "Enough," I said firmly, my voice echoing against marble and glass. All eyes shifted to me. For the first time that night, I wasn't just the subject of humiliation or pity. I was in control. "I think you've all seen enough to understand exactly who Susan Miller Hartwell is," I continued, "but you haven't yet heard what Eleanor intended for her fortune." The crowd leaned in, eager, breathless. Even those who wanted to flee this nightmare couldn't look away. I unfolded the will with deliberate care. "If my niece, Janet Hartwell, observes kindness, respect, and dignity from her family in the 6 months following my passing, I read, she is to establish a family trust fund. This trust will support education, provide emergency aid, and assist family members who demonstrate compassion toward others, regardless of financial status." I paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. "But," I said, my voice dropping, "if cruelty, manipulation, or treatment based solely on presumed poverty is observed, the entire inheritance will be donated to charitable organizations, save for any funds set aside for those few who showed genuine kindness." Whispers swept the room. Guests turned to one another, the irony dawning. Had Susan shown the smallest decency, she might have secured generations of wealth. Instead, she had revealed her true character. Susan shook her head violently, her voice cracking. You can't do this. You can't give it all away." "Most of it, yes," I replied calmly. Eleanor named specific charities. She wanted dignity for the elderly, independence for those without family, support for communities often overlooked. Michael finally spoke, his voice raw. "And me?" I looked at him, not unkindly. "You allowed your wife to humiliate me without lifting a finger. You let her poison our bond. Eleanor's money will not reward silence." He flinched as though I'd struck him. Susan, desperate, grabbed at his arm. "Michael, don't let her do this. She's trying to control us." "Stop," Michael said sharply, yanking his arm away. His voice rang with something I hadn't heard in months' clarity. "Just stop talking." Susan froze, stunned. I turned back to the guests. But Eleanor was not without mercy. She wrote of hope for the future. She instructed that a trust be created for my grandchildren, should they ever exist. Funds for their education, their stability, so long as they are raised with respect, not contempt. Michael's head snapped up. "Grandchildren?" "Yes," I said, holding his gaze. "Their inheritance depends on the values they're taught. Kindness, compassion, respect for those who have less. That is Eleanor's condition." The crowd buzzed. Some smiled faintly, almost approvingly. The tide of judgment was irreversible. Susan slumped into her chair, face ghostly. "You can't," she whispered, but it sounded more like she was pleading with herself than with me. Michael stared at her, his expression dark with recognition. "I thought I knew you," he said quietly. "But I didn't, not really." Her lip trembled. "Michael, I love you." "No," he said, voice flat. "You love what you thought you were marrying into." The guests held their breath, as though waiting for a gavel to fall. And then, as if compelled by something greater than myself, I reached once more into my purse. My fingers closed around my phone. I tapped, and from the speakers came Susan's own voice, recorded weeks earlier in my apartment. "You know, Janet, after the honeymoon, we think you should seriously consider selling this place and moving into assisted living. Nothing fancy, just somewhere more appropriate for your situation." Michael's recorded voice chimed in weakly. "It would give us peace of mind, Mom." I stopped the playback, eyes fixed on them both. "You wanted me institutionalized, not because I needed care, but because my thrift store furniture embarrassed you. Because my life didn't fit your image." The weight of those words pressed down on the ballroom until it was suffocating. Michael's face crumpled. "Mom, I thought we were helping. You were helping yourself," I said coldly. "Helping Susan polish the life she wanted at my expense." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Susan bolted. She tore the veil from her head, stumbled across the ballroom, and fled through the double doors, her dress trailing like the ruins of everything she had lost. Her bridesmaids hesitated, exchanging wide-eyed glances, before hurrying after her. The ballroom exhaled as though the storm had passed. Guests began to gather their things, whispering furiously. This was no longer a wedding. It was a scandal, one that would be spoken of for years. Michael sat heavily at the head table, surrounded by spilled champagne and the ruins of cake. His hands shook as he covered his face. I stood over him, pity warring with disappointment. "I'm sorry it happened this way," I said softly. "But I'm not sorry you found out who she was before it was too late." He lowered his hands, tears streaking his face. "I failed you, Mom. I let her twist me, make me ashamed of you. I should have defended you." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." The words landed like a stone. He nodded, as though accepting a sentence. One by one, the guests departed, until only staff and a few stragglers remained. The band packed their instruments in silence. The flowers still glowed, mocking in their beauty, but the celebration was over. I gathered my purse, folded Eleanor's will, and turned to leave. At the doorway, I paused, looking back at my son, broken in his suit, staring at the wreckage of his own wedding. "There will be decisions to make," I said gently. "About your future, about whether Susan is in it, about whether you'll be the man I raised or the man she tried to make you." He looked up, eyes hollow. "Mom, will you help me?" I studied him for a long moment. "That depends, Michael. Do you truly want to change, or do you just want to be forgiven?" The question hung in the air, heavy, unanswered. I turned, walking into the cool night, my heels clicking against marble, the scent of roses fading behind me. Outside, the air was quiet, almost peaceful, as though the world itself was relieved the truth had finally been spoken. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Robert. "There's something you didn't see. Another clause in Eleanor's will. Call me immediately." My hand tightened around the phone, the weight of new uncertainty pressing against the night. What had Eleanor hidden, even from me? The night air outside the Belmont Country Club clung to my skin like cool silk, but my insides still churned with heat, humiliation, vindication, sorrow, all tangled together. The ballroom behind me had transformed from celebration to battlefield. Susan had fled. Michael sat alone, drowning in shame. And me? I walked out taller than I had in years, clutching Eleanor's will like a torch. But then my phone buzzed. Robert's message glowed on the screen. "There's something you didn't see. Another clause in Eleanor's will. Call me immediately." My pulse jumped. I thought I had read the will cover to cover, memorized every stroke of Eleanor's sharp handwriting. Another clause? What had she hidden, even from me? I pressed call. Robert answered on the first ring, his voice low and urgent. "Janet, we need to meet, in person." "I just walked out of the wedding," I whispered, glancing back at the glowing windows where guests still lingered. "What's going on?" "There's a section Eleanor instructed me not to disclose until after." "A public reckoning," Robert said carefully. "Tonight qualifies." My breath caught. "What does it say?" "Not over the phone," he said firmly. "Too sensitive. Come to my office in the morning. First thing." And just like that, he hung up. I stood there, the phone cold in my hand, the night spinning around me. The battle with Susan was over. But Eleanor, even from the grave, had just begun a new game. The next morning, I arrived at Robert's downtown office as the city yawned awake. The glass towers reflected a sky streaked with gold, the hum of traffic filling the streets. Inside, the law firm's lobby was hushed, the air perfumed faintly with leather and paper. Robert ushered me into his office, closing the door behind us. He looked more tired than usual, his salt and pepper hair rumpled, his tie askew. On his desk sat a slim folder embossed with Eleanor's name. "Sit," he said. I lowered myself into the leather chair, clutching my purse in my lap. "Tell me." He opened the folder, flipping to a section I had never seen. "Eleanor anticipated betrayal," he said. She wrote an additional clause, sealed separately. Her instructions were clear. It was to be revealed only if your family failed her test, which, as of last night. He trailed off. He didn't need to finish. The images of Susan mocking me, the sound of her cruel laughter, the silence of Michael, all of it proved the test had been failed spectacularly. Robert slid the paper toward me. My eyes scanned Eleanor's familiar scrawl. "If my niece, Janet Hartwell, determines her family has treated her with cruelty, neglect, or manipulation, I direct the following. The majority of my estate shall be donated to charitable organizations, as specified. However, a separate trust shall be created in secrecy, its existence known only to Janet and her attorney. This trust shall remain hidden from public record and family knowledge until a time when Janet believes it is safe to disclose. Its purpose is to protect her from retaliation and ensure she holds true power, even when others believe she has given it away." I blinked, stunne. "A hidden trust?" Robert nodded. "Yes, it's worth $1 million, untouchable, invisible. Eleanor wanted you to have a reserve no one could manipulate or steal. She called it," he flipped to another page, "her shield." My throat tightened. Eleanor, always the strategist, always one step ahead. But another line caught my eye, underlined twice in Eleanor's sharp pen. "Use it wisely. Use it when the wolves come knocking, because they will." A chill slid down my spine. "Wolves," I murmured. Robert leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Eleanor believed the exposure of truth would not end the battle, it would begin it. She suspected your wealth, once revealed, would draw out greed, resentment, even danger. I thought of Susan's pale face, her desperate protests, the calculation in her eyes even as her world collapsed. I thought of Michael, hollow with guilt but still bound to her by vows spoken only hours before. Wolves, yes, they would come. I left Robert's office with the folder clutched to my chest, the city roaring outside, my thoughts louder still. I had walked into that wedding humiliated and walked out triumphant, but Eleanor was right. Triumph wasn't safety. If anything, it made me pray. The days that followed were a blur of whispers. Word of the wedding disaster spread through town like wildfire. The bride fainted. The mother-in-law was secretly rich. The video, did you hear the video? Everywhere I went, eyes followed me. At the grocery store, the post office, even church. Some looked at me with pity, some with admiration, some with envy. Michael called twice. I let it ring. On the third attempt, I answered. His voice cracked with exhaustion. "Mom, please, I need to see you." I hesitated. "Why?" "Because Susan's gone. She left. Her parents came and took her things. She filed for annulment. Everyone's talking. I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes, the ache sharp in my chest. He sounded like the boy he once was, calling me after scraping his knee, needing comfort. But he wasn't a boy. He was a man who had failed me. "We'll talk," I said finally. "But not until you understand the difference between regret and remorse." That evening, I sat in my apartment, the same polyester sofa Susan had mocked cradling me, the same clip-on lamps casting their warm, imperfect light. On the coffee table lay Eleanor's folder, the secret trust like a heartbeat beneath the paper. I thought of Eleanor watching me all those years, seeing me volunteer at the community center, watching me stretch pennies without complaint. She had known. She had prepared me. She had given me not just money, but armor. And yet, unease gnawed at me. Wolves. They will come. As if on cue, a knock rattled my door. I froze. It was late, nearly 10. No one visited me at this hour. My pulse quickened as the knock came again, louder. I rose slowly, crossing the room, my fingers trembling as I reached for the knob. Through the peephole, I saw a figure. Michael. His suit was rumpled, his tie loose, his face haggard. He looked nothing like the glowing groom from 2 nights ago. "Mom," he said when I opened the door, his voice breaking. "Please, let me in." I hesitated, Eleanor's words echoing in my mind. "The wolves will come knocking." Was my son, the boy I had raised, or the man Susan had molded? Michael stood in the middle of my modest apartment, his suit wrinkled, his hair falling out of place. He looked older than his 33 years, hollowed out by shame and fear. His eyes roamed the room as though he was seeing it for the first time: the worn sofa, the second-hand bookshelf, the little kitchen with its aging appliances. The same things Susan had mocked, now staring back at him like a silent jury. "She wasn't working alone," he said again, his voice cracking. I clutched Eleanor's folder in my lap, the secret trust pressing against my palms. "What do you mean?" Michael swallowed hard, running a hand through his hair. "Susan, she wasn't just humiliating you to make herself feel better. She'd been meeting with people. A man I didn't recognize. I thought it was about wedding vendors at first, but..." He stopped, his voice trembling. "I overheard her once. She was talking about guardianship, about putting you in a facility, selling your assets. But Mom, she wasn't just venting, she was planning." A chill ran down my spine. The cafe video. The man in the suit. My son hadn't been blind after all, just cowardly. "Who was he?" I pressed. Michael shook his head. "I don't know. She said his name was Collins. She told me he was a financial advisor. But the way they talked, it was more than that. It sounded like a deal." My grip tightened. Eleanor's warning echoed in my mind. "The wolves will come knocking." "Michael," I said slowly, "what else do you know?" He sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "That night at the rehearsal dinner, I saw her texting him. I asked who it was. She snapped at me, said I was paranoid, I didn't push, I didn't want another fight, and now," his voice broke, "now everything's collapsed." I studied him. My son. My only child. Torn between love and betrayal. Could I trust him? Or was he another wolf, wearing the face of family? The days that followed blurred into uneasy routine. The scandal of the wedding spread faster than wildfire. Articles surfaced online. Bride collapses after secret video plays at country club reception. Talk radio buzzed, with callers debating morality, family, money. Strangers stopped me at the grocery store, some to offer sympathy, others out of morbid curiosity. But beneath the noise, something darker stirred. I began noticing things. A black sedan idling too long outside my building. A man in a ball cap watching me at the post office. Twice I found my apartment door handle smudged with prints that weren't mine. The wolves were circling. One evening, as I was preparing tea, a knock came. Slow, deliberate. My chest tightened. Through the peephole I saw a man broad-shouldered, clean-cut, carrying a briefcase. His smile was too sharp. "Mrs. Hartwell?" he called smoothly. "I represent the Miller family. May I come in?" "Susan's family." I didn't answer. I slid the chain across the door, voice steady despite my pounding heart. "You can speak from there." He chuckled softly, as though humoring a child. "No need for theatrics. We'd just like to discuss your late aunt's estate. A woman of your age shouldn't be burdened with these matters. We can take the responsibility off your hands." Anger surged through me. "Tell Susan's family this. Eleanor's estate isn't theirs to touch, and neither am I." His smile didn't falter. "You may find things complicated if you refuse. Court battles, guardianship petitions, it's all very time-consuming, draining, expensive. Why not avoid that?" I slammed the door in his face. My hands shook as I slid the deadbolt. Through the door his voice came, still smooth, still menacing. "Think about it, Mrs. Hartwell. The wolves are patient, but they're always hungry." I stood frozen, Eleanor's words pounding in my head. Michael visited again the next day, his eyes bloodshot. "They came to me too," he admitted. "Susan's parents. They said I could still salvage something if I sided with them. They want access, Mom. To you, to Eleanor's money. They won't stop." I stared at him, searching for truth. "And what did you say?" "I told them no," he said quickly. "I told them I'd already lost too much." He looked at me desperately. "Mom, you have to believe me." I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to. But doubt lingered like smoke. That night, I pulled out Eleanor's folder again, rereading the hidden clause. "Use it when the wolves come knocking." My aunt had known this would happen. She had prepared me. The secret trust was my shield, but also a weapon. The question was, when to use it? The breaking point came a week later. I returned from volunteering at the community center to find my apartment door ajar. My breath caught. Slowly, I pushed it open. Inside, the drawers were rifled, papers scattered, my jewelry box overturned. They hadn't taken much, just searched. They were looking for proof, for money, for weakness. I sank into my chair, the violation stinging deeper than theft. They wanted me to feel unsafe, to surrender. But instead, something hardened in me. I wasn't just Eleanor's heir. I was her chosen one, the woman she trusted to carry her final lesson. They thought I was prey, but I could be the wolf too. That night, I called Robert. "It's time," I said. "For the trust?" he asked. "Yes, but not just for me. I want to make it public. I want them to know I'm not defenseless." Robert hesitated. "That's dangerous. If they know you have hidden reserves, they'll come harder." "Let them," I said, steel in my voice. "I won't cower, not anymore." He sighed. "Then prepare yourself. Once this is revealed, there's no going back." The following Sunday, I stood at the Riverside Community Center, surrounded by seniors and volunteers. Robert joined me at the podium, a stack of papers in his hand. "Today," I announced, my voice carrying across the room, "I'm establishing the Eleanor Hartwell Shield Trust. $1 million dedicated to preserving dignity for seniors, protecting them from exploitation, ensuring independence." Applause rose, warm and genuine. Cameras flashed. Local reporters scribbled notes. "Let Susan's family hear. Let the wolves know. I was no victim." But as the clapping swelled, I noticed a figure in the back of the room. A woman in dark glasses, her posture rigid, her lips curled in a faint, knowing smile. "Susan." She slipped out before the applause died. The applause at the community center still rang in my ears long after the crowd dispersed, but it wasn't their clapping that haunted me. It was her. Susan. I had seen her standing in the back, disguised in dark glasses, her posture rigid, her mouth curled in that smug little smile that always meant trouble. She had slipped away before anyone else noticed, but I had seen enough to know one thing. Susan wasn't finished. Eleanor's words came back to me, "The wolves will come knocking," and Susan was no lone wolf, she was the one who opened the gates. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at Eleanor's folder, the hidden clause, the Shield Trust papers Robert had filed. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. My hands rested on the table, but my mind ran circles. What was Susan planning? Why had she shown up in public at all, when humiliation should have driven her away? The answer came the next morning. I was sipping coffee when the knock came. 3 sharp raps, authoritative. Not Susan this time. Through the peephole, I saw 2 men in dark suits. One carried a leather briefcase, the other wore the expression of someone who already owned the room he was about to enter. "Mrs. Hartwell," the taller one said when I cracked the door. "We're here on behalf of the Miller family. You've been served." He thrust a manila envelope into my hands and turned away without another word. Inside, legal papers. Petition for guardianship. Filed by Susan and her parents. They were attempting to declare me incompetent, unable to manage my own finances. If they succeeded, they would gain control over Eleanor's fortune, what remained of it after the charities, and even the Shield Trust might be pulled into dispute. I sat heavily on the sofa, the same polyester embarrassment Susan had mocked, my heart pounding. Guardianship. It was the oldest trick in the book, take away someone's independence by convincing the court they can't care for themselves. I had seen it happen to women at the community center. Once the papers were filed, the burden of proof shifted. I was the one who would have to fight. I called Robert immediately. His voice was tight. I expected this. Susan's family was never going to lick their wounds quietly. They're sharks, Janet. They smell money. "They think they can declare me incompetent?" I snapped. "They'll try," Robert said. "They'll drag your age, your income, your modest apartment into the light and twist it into weakness. But you have Eleanor's paperwork, your bank records, the Shield Trust, and most importantly, you're lucid, capable, independent." "I need to win," I whispered. "You will," Robert assured, "but you need to be prepared. This won't just be legal. It will be personal. Susan will come for your reputation." I looked around my little apartment. The furniture wasn't elegant, but it was mine. The kitchen wasn't modern, but I cooked in it every night. This wasn't incompetence, this was survival. And I refused to let them strip me of it. The hearing was set for 3 weeks later. The days crawled, each one heavier than the last. The gossip spread faster than wildfire. Susan's suing her mother-in-law. The bride fainted, and now she's filing guardianship papers. That poor woman, imagine being attacked by your own family. At the grocery store, strangers whispered behind their carts. Some offered sympathetic smiles. Others eyed me with suspicion, as if wondering if perhaps I was, in fact, losing my grip. Michael visited often, but his presence brought as much pain as comfort. He was caught between worlds, torn in half by loyalty and shame. One evening, he sat at my kitchen table, staring at the petition papers. "Mom, I swear, I didn't know. Susan filed this with her parents behind my back. She said she was protecting me." "Protecting you?" I snapped. "From what? From the embarrassment of having a mother who lives within her means? From the humiliation of a parent who doesn't care about appearances?" His face crumpled. "I let her twist me. I let her tell me you were holding me back. And now," his voice broke, "now I don't know how to fix it." "You can't fix it for me," I said sharply. "You can only decide who you want to be. The man I raised or the puppet she carved." He dropped his gaze, tears falling onto the papers. For the first time, I believed he was beginning to see clearly. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully, not in designer clothes, not in Susan's idea of wealth, but in dignity. My navy dress again, pearls at my throat, my hair pulled back. Eleanor's will tucked securely in my purse. At the courthouse, cameras flashed. The scandal had become spectacle. Reporters shouted questions. I kept my eyes forward. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Susan sat with her parents at one table, her face pale but her posture rigid, her eyes gleaming with that familiar arrogance. Michael sat on the edge of her row, separate but bound, his hands twisting nervously. At my table, Robert placed a reassuring hand over mine. "Just tell the truth," he whispered. The judge entered, and the hearing began. Susan's lawyer painted me as fragile, isolated, incapable. He gestured toward photos of my modest apartment, my old Civic, my volunteer work as though they were evidence of weakness. "Mrs. Hartwell lives alone in unsafe conditions. She drives a car nearly 20 years old. She has no family support system. It is in her best interest to have guardianship assigned to ensure her welfare." My chest burned with fury. Unsafe? Because I cooked my own meals? Incompetent? Because I clipped coupons? When it was Robert's turn, he rose with calm precision. "Your Honor," he said, "my client is not only competent, she is the trustee of a multi-million-dollar estate. She established the Eleanor Hartwell Shield Trust, allocating $1 million for community aid. She volunteers weekly at the Riverside Community Center. She manages her own finances meticulously. The petition before you is not concern, it is greed, weaponized through legal manipulation." He slid the hidden clause forward, Eleanor's words shining like steel. "The wolves will come knocking." Eleanor Hartwell anticipated this very scheme, Robert continued, and she safeguarded her niece against it. "My client is the victim of a smear campaign designed to strip her of dignity and autonomy for financial gain. Nothing more." The judge's gaze shifted to me. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said, "do you wish to make a statement?" I rose, steadying my breath. "Your Honor," I said clearly, "I am 63 years old. I live modestly because I choose to. I volunteer because it matters to me. I drive an old car because it runs just fine. These are not weaknesses, they are choices. And I will not have my independence stolen by people who laughed at me when they thought I was poor, then turned predatory when they discovered I was not." The room buzzed. Susan shifted in her seat, her jaw tight. The judge leaned back, her eyes sharp. "I've heard enough," she said. The gavel struck once. Petition denied. Relief flooded me so quickly I nearly wept. But I kept my chin high. I would not give Susan the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Susan's face twisted with rage. Her parents whispered furiously to their lawyer. Michael bowed his head, his shoulders sagging with shame. It was over. Or so I thought. That evening, Robert and I sat in his office, the weight of victory still heavy but fragile. "You won," he said quietly. "But don't fool yourself. This isn't the end. Susan doesn't quit. If she can't win in court, she'll try elsewhere." I nodded, exhaustion tugging at me. She won't stop until she destroys me. Robert hesitated, then slid another envelope across the desk. Janet, there's something else Eleanor left. A final letter. I didn't show you before because her instructions were clear. It was only to be revealed once you faced them in court. My hands trembled as I opened it. Eleanor's handwriting leapt from the page, sharp and sure. Janet, if you are reading this, you have stood against them and prevailed. But know this, the true danger lies not in losing your independence, but in losing your resolve. They will attack you not just with courts, but with lies, with shadows, with fear. Someone close to you will falter. Trust carefully. Even love can be a wolf in disguise. My breath caught. Someone close, I whispered. My mind flashed to Michael. Robert's expression was grave. Eleanor believed betrayal would come not only from enemies, but from blood. I folded the letter slowly, my heart pounding. The courtroom battle was won, but the war for truth and my family was far from over. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. Michael's message burned across my phone screen like a brand. Mom, I need to tell you the truth. Meet me tomorrow, but come alone, please. It's about Susan and me. I sat in my armchair, Eleanor's final letter trembling in my hands. Someone close to you will falter. Trust carefully. Even love can be a wolf in disguise. The words were prophecy. And now they pointed toward my son. At noon the next day, I drove my Civic to the Riverside Park, where Michael had asked me to meet. The sky was heavy with clouds, the air damp with the scent of rain. Families strolled nearby, children chasing ducks, joggers passing by with earbuds. Ordinary life, as though mine hadn't been torn in two. Michael sat on a bench near the pond, his hands clasped, his shoulders hunched. He looked smaller somehow, his suit jacket wrinkled, his eyes rimmed with fatigue. When he saw me, he rose quickly, guilt and desperation etched across his face. Mom, he said softly. I stopped a few feet away, keeping my distance. You said you had something to tell me. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. Susan's not done. She never left town. She's been meeting with people, lawyers, Collins, even her parents. They're planning something bigger. I kept my voice steady. What do you mean? They want to smear you, he said, his voice shaking. If they can't win in court, they'll do it in the press. They'll say you're unstable, that you fabricated the recordings, that you set Susan up. They'll claim it was all revenge. My stomach turned. Revenge. The ugliest word, the easiest weapon. Michael's eyes filled with tears. And his voice cracked. I knew. I overheard her weeks before the wedding, talking about how to trap you. I didn't stop her. I didn't warn you. I was too afraid to lose her. Silence stretched between us, taut as wire. So why tell me now? I asked coldly. Because I can't keep living like this, he said desperately. I lost my marriage, my reputation, everything. And if I lose you too. His voice broke. I don't deserve forgiveness, Mom, but I want to help stop her. I studied him carefully. His words sounded genuine, but Eleanor's warning pounded in my ears. Even love can be a wolf in disguise. The smear campaign began 2 days later. Headlines screamed across tabloids and websites. Wealthy widow humiliates bride at wedding. Talk shows debated whether I had orchestrated the video to destroy Susan. Anonymous sources claimed I had a history of emotional manipulation. Susan appeared on a morning program, her face pale, her voice trembling as she told America how her privacy had been violated. She painted herself as a victim of a vindictive mother-in-law with too much money and too much bitterness. Michael sat beside her, stiff, silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. When I saw it, my chest constricted. Was this his betrayal, sitting beside her, lending credibility to her lies? Or was it something else, something more complicated? Robert came to my apartment that evening, papers under his arm, his face grim. She's dangerous, Janet. She's turning public opinion against you. If she succeeds, she'll drag you back into court. Defamation, fraud, even elder abuse claims, twisted against you. I laughed bitterly. Elder abuse? From me? Against her? Robert's eyes were sharp. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to be loud. And she's loud. I gripped the arm of my chair, fury and exhaustion colliding. So what do we do? You fight louder, Robert said simply, not with lies, with proof. We have Eleanor's will, the recordings, the Shield trust, and we have you. The woman who kept her dignity when mocked, who built a legacy when underestimated. That's what we show them. The televised showdown came a week later. The network invited us both to appear, Susan and her parents on one side, me and Robert on the other. The studio lights were blinding, the cameras cold, the audience murmuring with anticipation. Susan spoke first, her voice trembling just enough to sound fragile. I was ambushed at my own wedding, my private conversations stolen, my marriage destroyed by a bitter woman who resented me. I fainted from the humiliation, and now she's trying to rewrite history. Her mother dabbed at her eyes theatrically. Her father sat stiff, his jaw set in righteous indignation. Then it was my turn. I spoke calmly, firmly. I did not humiliate Susan. Susan humiliated herself. Those recordings weren't manufactured. They were her words, her contempt, her greed. Eleanor Hartwell left me her fortune not to make me powerful, but to reveal character, and Susan revealed hers. The moderator pressed me. But didn't you plan the video? Isn't that manipulative? Yes, I admitted, my voice steady. It was dramatic, it was deliberate, because truth often requires light, and Susan had hidden in shadows long enough. The audience murmured. Some nodded, some frowned. The debate was alive. And then came the final moment. Michael was called to speak. He sat between us, pale, trembling, torn in half. The studio held its breath. Michael, the moderator said, did your mother orchestrate this to destroy Susan, or is Susan lying? His eyes darted between us, his wife, his mother, blood or betrayal. His voice cracked. I failed both of them. I let Susan poison me against my mother. I didn't defend her, and that's on me. But the truth is, he stopped, his chest heaving. The truth is, my mother didn't destroy my marriage, Susan did. Gasps rippled through the audience. Susan's face crumpled, her parents stiffened, reporters scribbled furiously. I exhaled, the weight lifting, if only slightly. For once, Michael had chosen the truth. The fallout was swift. Susan stormed off the set, her parents scrambling after her. Headlines shifted, bride exposed by husband. Some still believed her, of course, some always would. But enough saw the truth to turn the tide. That night, Michael came to my apartment again, his face pale but resolute. I don't expect forgiveness, he said quietly. But I want to start again, to be the man you raised, not the man she twisted. I studied him long, my heart aching with love and doubt intertwined. Could I trust him again? Could I let him close without risking everything? Eleanor's words whispered in my mind, trust carefully. I set down the letter, my voice low. You'll have to prove it, Michael, not with words, with actions. He nodded, tears brimming. I will. Months passed. The guardianship battle was behind me. Susan faded into obscurity, her name whispered with scandal, not status. The Shield Trust grew, feeding programs for seniors, expanding meal deliveries, protecting those who had no family to protect them. I sat one evening in my armchair, the lamps casting their gentle glow, Eleanor's plaque from the community center shining on the shelf. I had survived the wolves. I had learned the hardest lesson, that wealth doesn't corrupt people, it reveals them. But as I sipped my tea, a thought gnawed at me. Susan had not worked alone. Michael had admitted as much. Collins, the mysterious man in the cafe, he had vanished, never named, never seen again. Where was he now? And what did he still want?